A large-scale bombing of Iran, and it's a strategic bombing. So what are the targets of these strikes, and what is the purpose of the U.S. military? That's the first answer we're bringing you today. In addition, at the summit in Turkey, Trump made an on-the-spot promise that Patriot missiles could be produced for Ukraine. So why did he make this decision? What's the mystery behind it? Today, this is the second key point I'm bringing you, and I think it's extremely important. It affects the entire world economy and the military landscape. All right, welcome to Listen and Watch what Fang Wei brings you. Good morning to the viewers of Good Morning America on YouTube, and hello to all the listeners of Sound of Hope Silicon Valley FM 96.1. All right, let's get straight to the point. The U.S. military has already carried out another round of strikes against Iran. This is the second round in the past 2 days. This time, about 90 military targets were hit, which is actually 4 times the number from the previous day. Although 80 targets were struck the day before, 60 of those were Iran's so-called mosquito boats. So in reality, there were only 20 actual targets. Now it's escalated to 90 targets. They struck Iran's air defense systems, coastal surveillance equipment, and destroyed a maritime monitoring tower. In addition, they targeted missile and drone storage sites, naval capabilities, as well as Iran's coastal military logistics infrastructure, among others. Another very important strategic target was a key railway bridge in northeastern Iran, specifically to the northeast of Tehran. So what does it mean to strike this railway bridge? It's located in northern Iran and Golestan province, and the bridge is called the Akhtat Gahan Bridge. This bridge serves as a trade corridor connecting Iran with its strategic partners, China and Russia. This is a railway corridor coming in from the east, and now this trade route has been cut off. So in this sense, it severs Iran's external support. As we all know, the sea routes are already completely blockaded, so only the railway was left. Now that the railway has been blown up too, only airplanes remain. But how much can planes actually transport? In Abishan in southeastern Iran, in a place called Iranshar, the airport's terminal and runway have also been bombed. President Trump said that every time they attack us, we will respond with 20 times the force. This is the formula that Trump established. It's actually pretty similar to Israel's approach. If you hit Israel once, they'll hit you 10 times. As for the United States, if you hit us once, we'll hit you 20 times. In fact, it's not just 20 times, it could be more than 20, even 30 times. Trump once again warned that if Iran attacks ships again, the United States will respond even more forcefully. So how did Iran respond? It's like Zhangsan hits Iran, and Iran hits Lisi. Still a tactic. Iran launched attacks on 4 Gulf countries, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, and Jordan. The attacking drones and missiles were all intercepted, right? Trump also carried out strategic attacks on 3 locations, 3 important islands. One is called Kark Island, one is Keshem Island, and the other is Abu Musa Island. As you can see, these are the 3 areas marked with boxes. In the north, that's Kark Island, which is where 90% of Iran's crude oil exports come from. As for the other 2, the long one is called Keshem Island, and the other is Abu Musa Island. Let me introduce these 3 islands to everyone. Kark Island actually has nothing to do with the shipping lanes of the strait, as you can see. It's far up in the northern part of the Persian Gulf, but it's where 90% of Iran's crude oil is loaded and shipped. There are also a large number of crude oil storage tanks here. As our director just showed everyone, it can load several million barrels of crude oil every day, and its annual throughput is nearly 1 billion barrels. So why is this island so important? Why does all the oil have to be loaded on the ships on this island? This is related to the geographical features along the coast of the Persian Gulf. Iran, for example, actually has many important oil fields that are offshore, as well as natural gas. So although they produce crude oil, the waters along Iran's mainland coast in the Persian Gulf are very shallow, so supertankers can't get in. That's why Iran uses underwater pipelines, both natural gas and oil pipelines, to transport the resources. They built a network to transport oil from various offshore oil fields to Karg Island because Karg Island has deep water, high-capacity oil loading terminals. So, as everyone knows, Karg Island is about 80 kilometers away from Iran's coastline, which is quite far. That's why the water here is so deep, allowing super large oil tankers to dock. So basically, Iran uses underwater pipelines to transport oil from all over the country to this deep water island and then brings in large oil tankers to take it all away in one go. That's how it works. That's why Karg Island has become the heart of Iran's oil exports. So what about now? Obviously, Trump's intention is to seize this island, very likely. If they manage to take this island, then there's no need to pay a huge price to blockade the strait anymore. As you know, outside the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman, the U.S. military has stationed 2 aircraft carrier strike groups and 24 warships. So if a ship comes out, you have to go after it. Some of these ships are enormous, you know? If you don't hit them precisely, you can't stop them. You have to take out their rudder or their engine room, but you also can't cause massive casualties. So it's a really tough job. The price to pay is also very high, but if you manage to take Hark Island, you have to know that 90% of Iran's crude oil is shipped out from here, and once you take it, you should realize that this island isn't actually within Iran's territory. It's about 80 kilometers away from Iran's coastline. Okay, so basically it's like half the width of the Taiwan Strait. So Iran doesn't have any warships right now, nor does it have any aircraft or paratroopers. So if the U.S. military were to take this island, Iran would pretty much be powerless. There's nothing they could do. In that case, Iran's only option would be to use drones and missiles to attack the island. But if the U.S. sets up a defense system on the island, like Israel's Iron Dome, that would be enough. So basically, it would be an easy win. Now, as for Keshem Island, it controls the Strait of Hormuz. Keshem Island is quite long, and it sits on the northern side of the strait. It's like Iran's immovable aircraft carrier. There's an airport on it, and there are stationed troops. Iran's 2nd Marine Division and the entire Iranian Navy headquarters are based there, so it's heavily garrisoned. As for Abu Musa Island, it's actually called Musa Island, and it's a strategic choke point for entering and exiting the strait, located right in the middle of the strait. As you can see, Abu Musa is down here, and actually above it there are 2 more islands. One is called Greater Tumb Island, and the other is Lesser Tumb Island. These are all places the U.S. military might try to occupy. So if the U.S. bombs these 3 locations this time, because there's always the question, why bomb them? What's the next step? Are you planning to take them over? If the U.S. does take them, Iran would actually be powerless to respond, because without a navy, it has no way to send in ground troops to land and fight the U.S. in a ground war. So basically, they'd get them for free. So right now it's true. These 3 islands are basically on the verge of being militarily occupied. A retired Navy Vice Admiral named Robert Hubbard said that Trump's recent use of force has exposed Iran's weakness, specifically its inability to strike back. The problem is, right now, Iran can only target Gulf countries, but even then, all the missiles and drones it launches at these Gulf nations are intercepted in the air. So the only damage these countries suffer comes from the debris of the intercepted missiles falling to the ground. So it's true, in one country, someone was injured by falling debris, but aside from that, there haven't been any other deaths. That's why Lieutenant General Hamad said, "My suggestion is to gradually advance along the Gulf, destroy their coastline, in other words, destroy and occupy the coastline." Ultimately threatening the very survival of all of Tehran. Then President Trump, speaking to reporters aboard Air Force One, said, they, Iran, called me saying they want to negotiate. They're extremely eager to reach a deal. But Trump said, "I just don't know if it's worth making a deal with them. I don't know if they'll stick to the agreement. I don't know if they can be trusted. They're just a bunch of lunatics. You know, their heads aren't screwed on right. Privately, they talk nicely, but in public, they completely deny everything. So what's the point of negotiating anything?" Yeah, that's the situation. Also, while the U.S. and Iran are continuing to carry out intense attacks against each other in the Middle East, President Trump will be back at the White House by 1 p.m. today to receive an intelligence briefing. U.S. officials told this news outlet that the White House is currently deciding whether to prepare for airstrikes against Iran that could last several days or even weeks. At the same time, another development on the side is, as you know, I've mentioned before that Iraq's Prime Minister, Zaidi, who just took office in May, arrested a group of pro-Iranian lawmakers and officials. He then announced that Iraq would declare political cooperation and an economic partnership with the United States, aiming to strengthen its relationship with the U.S. and also trying to act as a mediator in negotiations between Iran and the United States. That's the situation right now. So, as you can see, the U.S. is constantly working to cut down Iran's sphere of influence in the Middle East. All right, now let's move on to Feng Wei's commentary. On the Iran issue, to be honest, Trump has really shown a lot of patience. The U.S. actually has a lot of cards to play, but Trump would rather seek peace. He doesn't want to use those cards either, because all Trump wants is for Iran not to have nuclear weapons. After the bombing last June, and then again after the bombing that started at the end of February this year, Iran's nuclear weapons program has basically been set back so much that it probably won't recover for another 10 years. So at the moment, for Trump, Iran is not his main focus, not the main focus of his policy, but still, Iran can be considered. They keep causing trouble, really acting like they don't know what's good for them. It's almost like they're just seeking death. Of course, that's also a characteristic of an evil regime. So what will Trump do next? My personal view is that it depends on whether Iran gives in or not. If Iran gets scared after being hit, they'll come back to the negotiating table. If they just put on a show and pretend to negotiate, then Trump might not take things further. Otherwise, Trump really might launch an amphibious assault, like we just talked about, landing operations on those islands. But right now, no media outlet is saying this. That's just my own perspective, just my commentary, right? It's my own speculation. So with Trump's current bombing strategy and his overall approach, it seems like this is one possible option. So taking control of the Strait of Hormuz, that's basically what this means. Now, next, I want to share a very important piece of news with everyone. Trump has authorized Ukraine to produce Patriot missiles on his own. What is Trump thinking with such a major decision? Because a decision like this has never been made before. Why give this to Ukraine? So Trump and Zelensky had a bilateral meeting in Ankara yesterday, and the atmosphere was really good. It was completely different from when Zelensky came to the White House a few months ago. Last year, when they argued, it was like two totally different people. So what's the main takeaway here? Trump said right there on the spot that he would allow Ukraine to produce American Patriot missile interceptors themselves. This is the most significant achievement from the negotiations between the two sides. Trump even said, we actually don't have that many ourselves, but in the short term, we can send you some, and in the long run, you can produce them yourselves. Okay, so this is a major boost to Ukraine's air defense capabilities. Why do I say that? Because right now, Russia is attacking Ukraine in three ways. One is drones, another is cruise missiles, and the third is ballistic missiles. Now, drones and cruise missiles, well, to put it simply, a cruise missile is basically a type of drone too. It's like a large missile drone. It flies relatively slowly, kind of like an airplane, so you have plenty of time to react and intercept it. But ballistic missiles are different. Once a ballistic missile is launched, it comes crashing down directly from the sky. They're extremely fast. In just 1 second, they can travel 2 or 3 kilometers, so you really can't intercept them. With Ukraine's current capabilities, it's basically impossible to intercept them. Plus, Russia's ballistic missiles are often targeting residential buildings now, which is truly terrifying. So the casualties are extremely heavy. Right now, Ukraine just can't stop them. The only things that can stop them are the American Patriot missiles, or systems like THAAD and so on. Only the Americans are able to intercept them, but these missiles are extremely valuable. Each one costs several $millions. The U.S. itself doesn't have that many, and now they're also at war with Iran, right? So even in this situation, first of all, Trump said, we don't have many left, but in the short term, we'll still send you some. That's the first point. Second point. These missiles are very complicated to use, but we'll teach you. You have some very brave soldiers, and we'll show you how to use them. Third, you can produce them yourselves. This is basically treating you as one of our own, right? Now, the second point. The U.S. says it will create some kind of security guarantee plan, a so-called security package for Ukraine. What does that mean? Simply put, the weapons the U.S. gives Ukraine can now strike inside Russia. Previously, despite Biden providing many weapons like HIMARs, striking inside Russia was banned, limiting them to defense. They could only use them on their own territory. So now, Trump is also loosening these restrictions, allowing the U.S. to let Ukraine use American weapons to strike even deeper targets inside Russia. Right, so you see, actually Trump is being very fair in the Russia-Ukraine war. If you say he's pro-Ukraine or pro-Russia, no matter which side you say he's on, there will be supporters from the other side criticizing him. But in reality, his goal is truly to bring about a ceasefire. All right, thirdly, this is the third point, and actually the most important one. Trump rarely praised Zelensky, saying, we have established a good relationship. It's hard to achieve. This is incredible. So this stands in stark contrast to last year's public argument with Zelensky in the Oval Office at the White House. Do you all remember that? I said last year that over the course of time, Trump would come to understand Zelensky. In my opinion, this guy is really a tough guy. So when he was young, he was attracted by the far-left ideologies of the West and got involved with some liberal stuff. But, you know, that's just how young people are. Still, I think he has good morals. He's very courageous. I've looked into this, especially the situation before the war. Back then, even before the war, the relationship between Ukraine and Russia was already very tense, and there was already this anti-Russian sentiment in Ukrainian culture. There was a movement to reject Russian culture, including the Russian language. They stopped teaching the language and things like that. But at the time, he opposed this. He said, you can't do that. You can't go to extremes. Okay, so he didn't agree with that. I may have mentioned this before, but Zelensky is actually a very broad-minded person, and he's also extremely brave and patriotic. When Kyiv was on the verge of being captured, he refused to leave. Even when Biden offered him a way out, he didn't run. He stayed and held on until now. So when he stood in the White House, a leader of a weak country that had lost almost everything and faced off with Trump, that also took a lot of courage, didn't it? Anyway, after all this time, I think what Trump admires is a tough guy, a strong man. Trump respects strong men, so I think Zelensky really did earn Trump's respect. All right, now, I still haven't gotten to the key point, the real reason why they're letting Ukraine produce such important core American equipment themselves. Why? It's because of Ukraine's drones. Because this time, these drones are incredibly powerful. I'll talk about that in a bit. I'll discuss how the Russia-Ukraine war has shifted because of this. But clearly, during this meeting, Zelensky convinced Trump of just how impressive their drones are, how they've changed the course of the war, and he explained the actual results to Trump. So Trump, the United States and Ukraine have already signed 3 cooperation agreements on drones, aiming to bring the drone technology that Ukraine has honed in the heat of war into the U.S. military. As everyone knows, Ukraine is now producing over 10,000 drones per day. The cheapest drones cost just a few $100s, while the most expensive one, the FTFP Firepoint #1, which just hit the Omsk oil refinery the day before yesterday, costs only about $20,000. But this Omsk oil refinery processes 460,000 barrels of crude oil every day. 460,000 barrels a day. And with just $20,000, they managed to cripple it. Because as soon as it was hit, the refinery immediately shut down. That's the situation, right? So you could say that Ukrainian drones are truly turning the tide of the war now. So Trump was really amazed. While he was in Ankara, he said he never expected drones to be this powerful. They've completely changed the course of the war. So my interpretation of this is that Trump immediately decided on the spot to grant Zelensky the manufacturing rights for Patriot missiles. Why make this exchange? It's to trade for Ukraine's drone technology, because right now Ukraine is strong in offensive drones, but weak in defending against ballistic missiles. I've told everyone before, ballistic missiles are basically unstoppable. They come down from the sky at extremely high speeds, and you just can't block them. But the U.S. wants to focus on missile defense. You all know about the 2 U.S. aircraft carriers, right? They're just sitting there off the coast of the Arabian Sea, completely unshaken. Iran has launched saturation attacks against these U.S. carriers. Trump once said that at one point, they fired over 100 missiles at them. They got them all. The U.S. excels at missile defense. Offensively, they're also powerful. Their only offensive flaw is that the cost is just too high. Take the F-15, F-16, F-22, F-35 refueling planes and AWACs. Each of these aircraft, even the cheapest ones, cost over $10 million, and the most expensive ones are over $100 million each. So the cost of offense is enormous, and the risk to the pilots is extremely high. If one of them gets shot down by accident and you have to rescue a colonel, in the end, you could end up losing tens of millions of dollars just like that. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars going in. Plus, these manned high-tech aircraft burn a huge amount of fuel, which is extremely expensive. So, for example, when the U.S. fought Iran, the war lasted 42 days. And with these last 2 days, that's 44 days. Billions of dollars in military spending have been poured in. But if you switch to cheap drones, just think about what that would mean. The cost of war would drop dramatically, while the offensive power would increase significantly. Especially after American drones are equipped with U.S. AI systems, they can autonomously search for targets. So, in effect, this means the U.S. military is getting a generational upgrade. We've all heard Trump talk about defending the Taiwan Strait. He's been pretty hesitant, saying that if we have to defend the Taiwan Strait and go to war with the Chinese Communist Party, it would mean Russian reinforcements across more than 9,000 miles. That's what they call Russian reinforcements over 10,000 miles. But the Taiwan Strait is only 159 nautical miles away from the Chinese Communist Party, right? That's just 159 kilometers. So if the U.S. upgrades to using drones, then maybe just one drone carrier plus an escort fleet could handle it. Not even a single ship could make it across the Taiwan Strait. That's why Trump recognized the value of Ukraine's combat capabilities. So he made a bold decision on the spot. He just took it. Patriot missiles and Phantom drone technology. We all know that the military cooperation between the United States and Israel is extremely close. Israel's greatest strength is its Iron Dome defense system, which can even shoot down mortars. Mortar shells are intercepted and brought down. So you could say the Iron Dome is not quite impenetrable, but its interception rate is over 94%. On one side, you have Israel with extremely strong defensive capabilities, and on the other, you have the United States, which funded the research and development with extremely strong offensive capabilities. Ukraine and the other side are both brave and skilled in battle, each with their own strengths, the things they've honed in real combat. Everyone knows there are many things you just can't learn without actual combat experience. No matter how well you plan, it's useless. What about the CCP, their so-called JEE series? When I say JEE, I mean that J-E-J-E, J-Y-J, the stream. If you translate it as GE, it literally means washing clothes. Those things are all just for show. They haven't seen real combat. How can they claim they're actually usable? So it's all just empty boasting. They bought so much stuff, spent so much money, and in the end, what does it amount to? It's just an empty shell. But Israel and Ukraine's Iron Dome defense network and their drones have proven themselves in real combat. Even the United States doesn't have that much real combat experience, not to that extent, right? So now, with Trump leading them, it's actually pretty good. It creates a kind of alliance with two battle-hardened, brave fighters on the front lines. Their strengths are now all in America's hands. But of course, America isn't going to give anything away for free, right? Israel has always been paying money, right? And Ukraine has given the Patriot missile manufacturing technology to the U.S. so that in the future, America can become a country that's not just hard to attack, but one that only hits others and doesn't get hit itself. So what does this mean? It means that the U.S. instantly gains 5 years of Ukraine's real combat experience and technology, which will significantly reduce the future costs for the American military. Wouldn't this make the U.S. a super military powerhouse? Who would dare mess with America after that? So would the Chinese Communist Party still dare to attack Taiwan in the future? They already can't beat the U.S. military, and if the U.S. gets a major upgrade backed by real combat technology, like a massive upgrade to its drone fleets, then what? Exactly. Does the Chinese Communist Party even have any chance left? So this seemingly simple news about Patriot missiles being produced for Ukraine actually has a much deeper significance behind it, at least from my perspective. All right then, let me remind you again. Thank you for watching Fangway Time. Besides reporting the news, I also provide analysis behind the news. Generally speaking, I can't say I'm 100% accurate, but my accuracy is usually quite high. So for those who enjoy Fangway's program, especially new viewers, please remember to subscribe to this channel, okay? All right, now let's take a look at the truly astonishing reversal happening on the Russia-Ukraine battlefield. Right now, Russia is facing a massive counterattack from Ukrainian drones. 80% of Russian cities are under attack. Let me show you the range of Ukraine's strikes. This strike radius is really something. I'll show you a few locations as examples. This is their strike radius. Now, the latest attack reached all the way down to Omsk, which is Russia's largest oil refinery. Hitting this location represents the current maximum radius of their strikes. Just a little to the right of it is the Tumen oil field. The Tumen oil field is Russia's largest oil field. If they managed to hit the Tumen oil field, then Russia's oil production capacity would be finished. It would be gone. You see, everyone? It's only 300 kilometers away, just that little bit more. And Moscow is completely within striking range. Even up north along this border, St. Petersburg near the Baltic Sea, which used to be called Leningrad, is also entirely within the strike radius. So as you can see, if you draw this circle, it covers the entire prosperous western region of Russia. Over 80% of the country's cities are located here. That's the situation. So it's really, really frightening. Russia's vast territory used to be its rear area, able to provide a steady supply of troops and ammunition. But now it's actually become a wide open gateway, an area that's impossible to defend. Because for Ukraine, it's such a small country, so it's actually easier for them to defend, right? There are only a few directions the enemy can attack from. But for Russia, how can they defend against drones coming in from any direction, targeting any place? It's impossible to defend. That's why oil refineries, airports, shipping routes, and other infrastructure far from the front lines are all vulnerable to attacks. And that's not all. Just yesterday alone, Ukraine struck 9 Russian ships in the Sea of Azov. The Sea of Azov is that area, you know? It's right below the Black Sea, the Sea of Azov. They hit 9 Russian ships there, oil tankers, oil transport ships. Now, as you know, even though Russia's facing sanctions from the West and the United States, they still sneak around in the middle of the night, doing things secretly. They load up the oil, this is what's called the shadow fleet. They turn off their transponders and sneak around at sea in the dark, so there's nothing you can do about it. There are over 1,000 of these ships, and the West can't do much. But now Ukraine has found a way. They just strike them directly using drones to hit them. So now Russia is facing a situation similar to when the U.S. blockaded Iran in the Arabian Sea. Ukraine is blockading Russia in the Black Sea, cutting off all its oil tankers. So now the situation is really intense. And not only that, Ukraine has already cut off Crimea. Do you all remember? Back then, Russian troops just parachuted in and occupied Crimea. Now, Ukraine has completely severed its supply lines to the peninsula, so Crimea might end up falling back into Ukrainian hands. He believed in, now in addition, on the front lines in eastern Ukraine, the Russian army's supply of food and ammunition is so strained that they're now relying on manpower to transport ammunition. Soldiers have to walk 30 kilometers just to carry ammunition. How are they supposed to fight like that? So the front lines are actually on the verge of collapse. That's the situation right now. On top of that, the U.S. has let go of its restrictions, right? The U.S. has let go. Now the weapons I give you can be used to strike inside Russian territory. So Russia has basically gone from being on the offensive to being on the defensive in just a month or two, and they're in a position where they can't even hold a line. Now, when Ukraine's drones strike Russian forces, they're mainly targeting energy and strategic facilities. They're definitely not hitting civilian buildings or anything like that, so there haven't been any consequences like that. So what about Russia? They just issued an order to ban all diesel exports nationwide until the end of July. Why? Because they don't even have enough diesel for themselves. Actually, starting from late June, out of Russia's 83 federal subjects, that is 83 provinces, more than half have already implemented fuel purchase limits. Now, drivers at gas stations in many cities across the country are facing this situation. They have to wait several hours just to get a tank of gas. Almost all of Russia's federal subjects are experiencing gasoline shortages or supply interruptions. Now, the next piece of news is even more shocking. The online editor of Russia's state-run TV channel RT, that is, Russian television RT, is a woman named Margarita Simonyan. She called on everyone to be patient and not to revolt. She recalled the food rationing system after the collapse of the Soviet Union and said, "We endured it before and we can endure it now. Please, everyone, be patient." She said everyone shouldn't revolt because that's what the enemy wants. Can you believe that? Making this kind of appeal? As we all know, Russia has suffered defeats on the front lines, and when the people revolt, that's actually a Russian tradition. Back when the Tsar lost in World War I, it ultimately led to his abdication, right? Later, it triggered the 1917 October Revolution. The October Revolution was also connected to the defeats Russia suffered on the front lines during World I. So actually, the situation in Russia is pretty dire. It changed to this state almost overnight.